Okay, let's talk about mindset. Firstly, we need to try and control the excitement. Now, the excitement and passion for boating is to be encouraged, but what we want to do is we want to curb that enthusiasm for the first part, while we go through the real sort of analytical process or really focused process of looking at what it's going to look like for you specifically. And if you find yourself in a sort of more heightened, excited state, sometimes it's easy to be steered down a rabbit hole, or coerced, let's say, with that excitement of things that are just showy and flashy and they look really good on the surface. But we've got to remember, we're looking at a boat from the keel up. We're not just looking at it from the lifestyle down. Okay, we want the lifestyle advantage, but we really have to understand boating from the keel up. We also have to understand our expectations from the keel up. And I've found that in the past, I've got onto boats and people are so excited about the whole process and it's all great and it's fabulous and they've got all these ideas and they've told a seller all their ideas. Oh, yep, that can do that. Yep, that boat can do that. That boat can do that. I'll just share one little story with you. Now, I'm not going to use specifics. I'm not saying there's such thing as a good or a bad boat. There are boats, lifestyle expectations, and area of operation. Okay, so that's what we have to focus on. Now, I was a boating instructor. Obviously, the boat had been purchased. It was a Carver 36. Now, that might be some person's ideal boat, not personally mine, but some people would find that to be an ideal boat. However, it would be an ideal boat if you were only using it in sort of estuary waters, inland waters, and maybe absolutely perfect weather, North Coast cruising. But she's not a bass straight boat by any stretch of the imagination, quite flat on the dead rise, and we'll talk about that later and when we're looking at hulls. But one of the owner's dreams was to go from Melbourne, from Docklands in Melbourne, to Launceston, Tasmania. And the broker told him that if he chucked a couple of bladder tanks on the back, he'd have plenty of fuel range to go to Tassie. Now, that's dangerous information. That's straight out dangerous. There is no way that boat was a bass straight ready boat. Now, the owner was so adamant that this was going to happen, even after I'd done the training with him, and I thought, he's really excited about that. I noticed he'd already started looking for bladder tanks, and it was a twin inboard petrol, and it did not have the fuel range at all for a start, and a couple extra bladder tanks would not have achieved that. So I said to him, Peter, I want to meet you here tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And I'm going to take you out in the bay and it's not going to cost you a cent. He goes, but the weather's not great tomorrow. I said, well, that's part of the reason. So I took him out and this is in Port Phillip. Now, we have a really nasty short wave period and it's sort of a localised chop, but it can get pretty nasty on Port Phillip Bay. It was a sou'wester, so the wind was coming from the sou'west, so the fetch was quite large from down at Port Arlington Way all the way up to Williamstown where we met that chop. It was only after I actually had to get him the muscle memory of how uncomfortable that boat was in a chop. When I looked at him and said, Peter, heading to Launceston anytime soon? And he shook his head, obviously. And I'm glad I met Peter in that instance, because I really, to this day, believe if I hadn't have done that with him, or told him that this boat was not a bass straight, open ocean going vessel, that he would have quite happily headed off out through Port Phillip Heads, which is, yes, in the top 5 most treacherous stretches of entrances in the world, but it doesn't have fire-breathing dragons on either side of it, so it is navigable. And he probably would have headed off to Launceston. So that's what I mean by we really need to just focus down on that mindset of just curbing our enthusiasm. Now, it's happened a few times that I meet people in the process of buying a boat, and they've been to a few boat shows and they've had a look at a few boats, and they're almost at that point of wanting to whack a deposit down or something, or they've got about 3 or 4 brokers in their ear, new boat and old boat, new boat, second-hand boat. And they'll come and they'll say, oh, I sit down with them and they're like, oh, this one's got the Raymarine this and this has got an Axiom that, it does this and this thing opens up and, this one, you think it's, been put together by the Thunderbirds. And I'll say, look, that's awesome, Thank you for your excitement. Your excitement and passion in boating is why we are here, and we want to encourage that. We're not trying to quell that. We're just trying to redirect those energies to make sure that you get to a position where you're going to make the right choice for you. So this is why mindset is really important. Yes, I tell a few stories, but I hope for those stories really crystallize and point out why mindset is so important. So let's go touch through the learning outcomes of this lesson we've been through on mindset. So the first thing is obviously control your excitement. Don't quell your enthusiasm for being on board a boat. We're here to encourage that at the end of the day. Just quell your excitement for the moment you're actually standing on your own boat. Yeah. And really then refocus that excitement into your research. So point two, the learning outcome from that is become a high-level researcher in this space. Don't overwhelm yourself, but really identify something that really excites you and research into that, okay? And try and work in that research. Try and work from the keel up, all right? Now, the third one would take away from that is don't assume the seller is the oracle of all knowledge on boating. It's, as I said, it's easy to sound like you know what you're talking about in this industry, but and no disrespect to brokers out there, their job is to sell. The ones that are going to be there for you are the ones that have that customer for life mentality, a genuine interest in your boating experience and your boating lifestyle, and have that genuine customer for life mindset.